world, it's Nostalgia Tash, and you're listening to Nostalgia Tash Watches Disney Plus films. This week we are getting back to the classics, the cream of the crop of Disney, the franchise and style most synonymous with the Disney brand. I'm talking about Disney animated classics. Specifically, we're jumping into the golden age of Disney animation, the 90s, and covering the Lion King franchise. So the Lion King franchise obviously includes The Lion King, from 1994, The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride from 1998, and The Lion King 1.5 from 2004. So let's just jump right in and start with The Lion King. Now, I don't know if you really need a synopsis of this film, but just for continuity's sake, I will give you one. So, Scar is jealous of his brother Mufasa, king of Pride Rock, and his new son Simba. To ascend the throne himself, Scar arranges the murder of Mufasa and frames Simba for the death. A banished Simba grows up, meets some friends, and tries his best to put his past behind him and forget his former life. But once Simba is reunited with his best friend Nala, Simba realizes that he can't run from his past, he must learn from it and return to Pride Rock to fulfill his destiny. So this film specifically has a lot of nostalgic childhood memories tied to it for me. Apparently it was the very first movie I saw in theaters. There's a home video of me jumping on my bed, singing along to I Just Can't Wait to Be King, wearing a paper pop-out mask. I think I was convinced that it was a Simba mask, but I think in my heart I knew it was really a Mufasa one. I don't know what happened to the Simba one, but anyway, wearing this Mufasa mask, singing this song, jumping on the bed, and then cut to, I don't know if it was the March break before, in the 8th grade, or if it was the March break in 9th grade, but me and my brother participated in this March break acting camp that was run out of the basement of a church. It wasn't like a church-centric thing. I think they were just renting out the space for March break. But anyway, and we put on a performance of The Lion King. It was sort of like this mashup between the Broadway musical and the movie. And it was sort of like a reverse, like back in Shakespearean times with plays where they would get the guys to play girl parts because girls weren't allowed in the theater. But in this March break camp, I think there was only 4 guys. So they made all of the guys just the hyenas. And then this one kid was Pumbaa and he was trying to just overact it the whole time. But the 2 facilitators shut him down hardcore. But anyway. So then all of the girls, which made up the majority of this March break camp, played all of the other characters. And I remember it being super cringe, but I'll have to talk to my parents about it and see if they remember what that experience was like. Even if my brother remembers that experience, because my brother has a foggy memory, I think, when it comes to stuff like this, but I'll have to ask him. But anyway, lots of childhood memories associated with the Lion King films specifically. So going over my notes, I'm pretty sure at the beginning of the film, when they're doing the whole Circle of Life thing and they're showcasing Simba off to the world, Rafiki essentially christens Simba, doesn't he? Because it's very, I don't know, as much as I know very little about christening and stuff like that, but as far as I know, it's you bless them with some holy water on their forehead, right? And you do sort of a Son, Father, Holy Spirit thing. And Rafiki seems to do something very similar with Simba, where he takes the fruit juice, ink, liquid, and wipes it on his forehead. So this film was remastered, and the remastered version is on Disney Plus. And it was really kind of throwing me off, which was weird because in the Aladdin rewatch, Aladdin was also remastered, but for some reason it didn't throw me off as much. The remastered Lion King almost looked too modern, but I don't know if this was just me kind of having a Mandela effect moment where I felt like the film doesn't, it looks too modern, but maybe it always kind of looked that way. Obviously, just a bit cleaned up from the remastered version. But yeah, it was really strange. I had to kind of wrap my head around that. So some of the other notes that I really liked about the film was when Zazu is rescuing Nala and Simba from the elephant graveyard and the hyenas show up. He does this kind of little quip where he goes, "Oh my, look at the sun," which I thought was really clever ode to that line, like, "Oh my gosh, look at the time." But of course, he doesn't have a watch, and I know that before kind of modern timekeeping was invented, they would use the sun to tell time. Obviously, that's how like sundials and shit were created, but I thought that was really clever. And the other one that I thought was really clever as well, which I think Disney missed an opportunity to create like signage and marketing for this, where I think Pumbaa makes a quote where he says, "Home is where your rump rests," which I just think, could you imagine? Like, Disney needs to get on this. If there was like a silhouette of Pumbaa's butt and it said like, "Home is where your rump rests," and then you could put that on like your front door, or even if they did like a welcome mat to your house that had that quote on there with like a silhouette of his butt, I just think that would be perfect, and they missed a marketing opportunity there. Something else that I enjoyed that I thought was like a poetic, nice touch was when Scar and Simba are fighting once he comes back to Pride Rock and is fighting to be king again, and he almost falls. There's that strategic lightning strike that like sparks up the dry savannah, which then adds that extra level of danger and heightens the emotions of the battle. But what are the odds that, you know, in the middle of this fight to the death, there's just this strategic lightning strike before there's like, you know, no rain, no nothing. That needed to happen. It was very poetic, I think, for the context of the scene that was playing out before them. But I think the likelihood of that happening is probably very slim. But, you know, this is a cinematic universe, so anything can happen. Some of the questions that I have a question, is what kind of area do Scar and the hyenas live in that's all steamy and geyser-like? Like, within the context of Africa, my very, very limited knowledge of Africa, when I watched... my knowledge of Africa comes majority from the fact that I watched that one documentary about the African lion. And now watching this film, I'm like looking at it through the context of that documentary a little bit. And so I don't know of, and they don't go over any sort of areas that might be, like steamy and geyser-like. Like, I don't know what sort of terrain that is and where that would be found within the African continent or within the context of where lions are from. Obviously, they had to give Scar like an evil lair, but yeah, I don't know. Are there places within the African savanna that have steam and geysers, or was this completely just for the sake of the film and for dramatic effect? One of the things, again, through the context of the one documentary I watched about Africa, I was wondering if the reason why Scar, obviously, they talked about him like over poaching the area, and then that's why it kind of leads to devastation and stuff. But I wonder too, because the savanna goes through this like dry season, and then when that happens, all of the animals have to leave the area that they're from in search for water. And I wonder if within the context of Scar becoming king and this happening, if this is within the dry season as well, and all of the herds left to go search for water, and because this pride is stubborn, is like, we need to stay at Pride Rock, that's why there's no food left. I think they explain a little bit more how the overhunting of the lions could also have caused this same effect. They go over it, I think, a little bit more specifically in some trivia and stuff if you wanted to look it up, but I wasn't sure. Or I hypothesized that maybe that might be a reason as well. One of the things that I was very curious about, so I looked it up and then went down a very big rabbit hole, was the whole hula diversion song that Timon does. So I actually looked up what he actually is singing. And so he says, "If you're hungry for a hunk of fat and juicy meat, eat my buddy Pumbaa here because he is a treat. Come on down and dine on this tasty swine. All you have to do is get in line. Are you aching for some bacon? He's a big pig. You could be a big pig too. Oi." And apparently, we'll jump ahead slightly in terms of IMDb facts, but that song is actually a fast-paced parody of the Hawaiian war chant, which is a song that until recently was I think it still is, but was incorporated in the Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room at Disneyland. So I fell down this rabbit hole, and I think the Enchanted Tiki Room at Disneyland has now changed, sort of, they've restructured it. I think it still does contain this Hawaiian war chant song, but it's not called the Enchanted Tiki Room anymore. But anyway, so the Hawaiian war chant was actually written by a Hawaiian prince, Leleohoku, in the 1860s. And it was originally titled, I'm going to butcher all this Hawaiian, Kawaika Hawaii. So apparently he wrote this when he was like a young boy. And then later it was adapted into a jazz rendition by Johnny Noble, who was also a Hawaiian resident, in the 1930s, and retitled Ta Wahwe, the Hawaiian war chant. And apparently the original song that the prince made had nothing to do with war. It was actually some kind of poetic song about two lovers. And then it was then remade into this jazz rendition, which, as far as I know, Johnny Noble just took the tune and reconstructed it. And then later on he reconstructed it and did Hawaiian words to the song. And then later on there was somebody who created some English verses for the song as well. And so the English verses then mimic or follow the same tune structure that then Timon was able to spoof for this Hawaiian luau distraction song. You with me still? But it was so difficult because I was trying to find links to the actual song lyrics themselves, what the song lyrics meant, and I think because the songs are quite old in their rendition, there's a million different versions of the Hawaiian war chant song, like on Spotify and things like that, but in terms of finding the original recordings and the original lyrics and things like that for the song was a bit of a mission. So, shameless plug moment. So within my podcast Instagram for Nostalgia_Tash tag on Instagram, I do little posts about each film that I watch, and so I tried my best to find the original lyrics from The Prince and the original lyrics from Johnny Noble with the English restructuring from somebody else, and put that in a post so that people can kind of compare and see the difference. So check that out if you're interested. The wormholes or the rabbit holes that you come under when you're doing research that you think is going to be easy, and then like 3 hours later you're still trying to figure it out. So moving on to the credit sequence, the endings of the film. What was obvious, but what I kind of didn't really notice until watching these credits specifically in the way that they structured them, is that voice actors are such a small part of an animated film. They obviously, because big names are usually attached to them, and they're the ones that go to the red carpets and do the press for the film and things like that. Like, they're very hyped up as, being sort of the cornerstone of the particular films. But when you actually look at the amount of people that go into an animated project, voice actors are like a minuscule part of the entire thing. And that's obvious when you think about it, but to have it just splayed out on in the credits for you to see was just very, it really sort of solidified how true that is. Some of the interesting jobs that were listed within the credits was a wildlife consultant, who was Jim Fowler, an animal anatomy consultant, which was Stuart Sumida, and live lion and animal models by David McMillan, Nick Toth / Cougar Hill Ranch. So I don't know how I feel about them possibly bringing live animals to the studio for animators to look at. I think I read up somewhere that was the case, but I do think that it's good that animators would do research on the actual animals that they are trying to animate, but I think there's possibly more ethical ways to do that. Additionally, there's a special thanks to the Fowler Center for Wildlife Education, the LA Zoo, Living Desert Wildlife and Botanical Park, the San Diego Zoo, San Diego Wild Animal Park, Pam Wahlberg, Metro Zoo, Miami, Florida, and Robert Carr Hartley. So I think these were other experts or places that the animators in the studio were able to get live action references or education about the African savanna and the animals and the wildlife, and specifically the lions from those places. So that's cool. So like I said, it was a remastered film, and that version is what is on Disney Plus, and it was remastered in 2018, which is possibly what explains my sort of Mandela effect jarriness about the thing, because 2018 is quite recent in terms of animation, so I would assume that the technology to do restoration of original movies is quite good. So that might explain why it just looked way too modern for me, but obviously that's a good thing because I'm sure it helps preserve films for a longer period of time and for audiences to continue to enjoy. The last note from the credits is that this film is in remembrance of Frank Wells, president of the Walt Disney Company from 1984 to 1994. So I had to do a bit of digging to find out what had happened to Frank Wells. So unfortunately, he was killed in a helicopter crash 3 months before the release of the film. But it's nice that they were able to dedicate this film to him. Alrighty. Let us dive into our IMDb facts for the film. So first fact, Frank Welker provides all the lion roars. Not a single recording of an actual lion roar was used because the producers wanted specific sounding roars for each lion. If you enjoy animation in even like a casual capacity, guaranteed you've heard Frank Welker voice acting in one of these projects. He, even throughout the Disney, even throughout like just TV, film, I'm sure video games, like he is a very big cornerstone in the voice animation, voice acting department. So if you're not familiar or you're interested just to see like how many projects that you've consumed that Frank Welker has had a part in, I encourage you to look up his IMDb. So it's Frank, F-R-A-N-K, Welker, W-E-L-K-E-R, and just, I don't know, gaze, remark, look in awe of the range of works that he's been a part of over the years. So next fact, the Wildebeest Stampede took Disney's CG department approximately 3 years to animate. A new computer program had to be written for the CG Wildebeest Stampede that allowed hundreds of computer-generated animals to run, but without colliding into each other. So I really appreciate this fact because I feel like, and I'm sure this happens in other animated films as well, but when you do research or you learn more about Walt Disney and his desire for constant innovation and the story of like the Imagineers within the context of Disneyland and stuff like that, I think it holds up the legacy of what Disney was and is trying to accomplish in terms of constantly pushing for new and innovative ways to tell the stories that they want to tell. So I think that was really cool that they literally generated a new computer program for this film, and I'm sure that's been beneficial in future films, future projects that they've worked on because they initially developed the software within this film. So apparently, The Lion King is the best-selling home video of all time with more than 55 million copies sold to date. Obviously, to date, videos kind of went obsolete at a certain point, so I'm sure that to date stops at a certain year, but that's really cool. It reminds me very much of when I was talking about Aladdin and the King of Thieves, when they were like, this is the number 4 selling home video sequel something of all time. This one has a little bit less categories in it, but I think that's very cool. Apparently, several character names are based on Swahili words. This is something that they do in the second film as well. So Simba is Swahili for lion, Nala is Swahili for gift, Sarabi, mirage, Rafiki, friend, Pumbaa, simpleton / weak-minded, Senji, barbarous, uncouth, uncivilized, savage. Despite the fact that Zawadi is the Swahili word for gift. Nala's name also means gift. I wonder if there's different dialects or different sort of colloquial terms within Swahili. So that's how they justified the naming structure. Apparently, which is very interesting, and I had to do some sort of digging in this, is that around 25 minutes into the film, there's the scene where Mufasa is explaining to Simba all about the stars and how the stars are all the old kings watching down on them. Apparently, the animation team put the constellation for Leo, the lion, in the sky. So I tried to find it. Hopefully I did. It'll be interesting if you're able to find the constellation as well, but I thought that was a really cute and interesting ode to lions. Yeah, it makes sense, obviously. So apparently this was the first Disney cartoon to be dubbed in Zulu for its African release. Very cool. So one of the things that they bring up a lot in here that I'm realizing is that the hyenas get a very bad rap in The Lion King. And apparently they're not as bad as they are portrayed in the film. So this fact here says that although all of the animals are obviously anthropomorphic in the film, hyenas, as the villainous characters, were most given the short end of the stick from the reality. In fact, spotted hyenas are considered the equal of lions in terms of intelligence and ferocity. They have an equally intricate social structure and are less likely to kill their own kind than lions. Hyena clan matriarchs allow very little intraspecies aggression. Also, while hyenas are portrayed as nearly full scavengers, in reality, lions scavenge the kills of hyenas much more, as if not more so than hyenas scavenge lion kills. So that was very interesting. So additionally, another fact was that while the hyenas in the movie are referred to as scavengers, real spotted hyenas are actually quite competent predators who hunt more than they scavenge and have their kills quite often stolen by lions. However, at the time the movie was made, many people, including scientists, thought that hyenas were actually pure scavengers, promoting the stereotype even further. So that was very similar to when I was watching those documentaries, how over time, obviously the facts about animals and nature are constantly being rediscovered by scientists, as we study new animals, new climates, or even existing knowledge about animals. When the scientific research tools and methods get more advanced, we're able to find out more and we're able to observe more, and therefore some of the knowledge that we thought we had previously about certain animals and species can then be defunct and we learn new things about them. So this is an interesting example of that. So justice for hyenas, they've gotten a very bad rap, part and parcel to the Lion King films. So this is a random fact, but apparently adult Simba's mane was supposedly inspired by Jon Bon Jovi's hair, which makes sense if you know what Jon Bon Jovi's hair looked like in the prime of Bon Jovi days. It was quite large and voluptuous. So apparently the close relationship between Timon and Pumbaa is actually based in fact. So in the wild, meerkats often stay close to warthogs to eat the fleas and ticks off their back, relieving the warthogs of an itchy parasitic nuisance. That's very similar to the bird and hippo relationship that I saw in, again, these documentaries that I've watched, and even I think there's lots of fish that do that as well, where they'll attach themselves to larger animals because there's like bugs or parasites or things that will attach themselves to the larger creature, and then the smaller one will use that as basically like a walking food source. So apparently that happens between meerkats and warthogs as well. So Sarabi was played by actress Madge Sinclair, and unfortunately this was the last film that she did before her death 1 year later, and she died at age 57 after a 13-year battle with leukemia. Doing a little bit more research into her, she was very adamant to continue working despite her leukemia diagnosis, and considering that she was battling with this cancer for over 13 years, you can kind of deduce that she probably was still actively fighting it during the voice recording and filming of The Lion King. So another fact is that production was affected by the 1994 Northridge earthquake, which shut off the studio and required animators to finish their work from home. So I had to do a bit of research into this earthquake. Apparently it had a 6.7 moment magnitude, which I guess is the more accurate measuring system to the Richter scale. Because I feel like colloquially, when there would be earthquakes in pop culture and things, they would talk about the Richter scale. Like, oh, it's a this on the Richter scale. Apparently that's not an accurate way of measuring earthquakes anymore. So I learned something new about that. So I guess it caused like billions of dollars worth in damage to property and things. So I guess this did occur around the time that the studio was working on Lion King and they had to finish their work from home. So interesting, fun, I guess, different types of history meeting in the middle. Because obviously when you hear about big natural disasters or things like that, you kind of forget or don't realize how companies and organizations have to adapt or live through those circumstances. Kind of similar to what's going on right now. The film was selected for the preservation in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress in 2016. So it joins our pal Living Desert in the National Film Registry. And our last fact is a little bit of conspiracy corner again. So if you remember in Aladdin, there is the sort of 90s kind of sexual innuendo conspiracy theories that permeated most of the golden age of Disney animation. Lion King was no exception. So apparently at around 52 minutes, there were rumors that when Simba collapses on a cliff after talking with Timon and Pumbaa about stars, the dust that flies off the cliff forms the word sex. In fact, it forms the letters SFX, the abbreviation of the special effects team that worked on that portion of the film. So the team obviously tried to be cool and like hide their department name abbreviation in the film, but the 2003 Platinum Edition release omits this word to avoid controversy. So I guess this one was a little bit more grounded in potential factual accuracies than the Aladdin one was, because I think in terms of stars and constellations and stuff, all it takes is for somebody to be like, there's an extra star in the bottom right corner, so it spells X, like it's an E instead of an F. Which sucks, because I think, I'm sure the special effects team was quite proud of their little inside joke there. And then for it to be taken out of context is probably frustrating for them. But yeah, so Disney 90s sexual conspiracy debunked. We're now going to take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to dive into the second film on our review, watch, discuss list, which is The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride. And we're back. So the next film we're going to go over is The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride. So I have this very vague memory of watching the film on like Halloween one year when I was younger, and I remember not liking it. I remember it like upsetting me, and I don't know what my problem was with it. So in rewatching it, nothing upset me in this film, but obviously I have thoughts on it. So the synopsis is that Simba and Nala have a daughter, independent and feisty Kiara. One day, Kiara evades the watch of Timon and Pumbaa and travels into the Forbidden Outer Lands. There she meets Kovu, and we learn about an exile sect of lions who are loyal to the deceased Scar. Zira, Kovu's mom, is Scar's most loyal follower and is training Kovu to kill Simba and avenge Scar's death. When both Kovu and Kiara are of age, if you will, Zira's plan is set in motion, but no one can predict, except Rafiki, that Kovu and Kiara would fall in love. Will the love of these two young lions unite the competing prides, or is the hate from their leaders too strong? So, the first note that I would like to say is that He Lives in You, which is my favorite song from or within the Lion King song franchise zeitgeist, is the intro song in this film. So He Lives in You is a song that is within the Lion King Broadway production. And usually it's played, I think, during when Simba's having his existential crisis and trying to figure out who he is. And Rafiki takes him on that adventure where he finds out that his dad is still part of him even though he's no longer around. So that is my favorite song. I don't know what it is about it, I just love it. I almost missed it in the first film, even though I know it wasn't going to be there. So it made me really happy to hear it as the intro song for this film. So they redo the ending of the first film. So of course at the ending of the first Lion King, Simba's now king of Pride Rock again, and Nala and Simba have a daughter, and Rafiki does the whole thing at the end of the film, like he did at the beginning of the film with Simba, but now it's with his daughter, Kiara. And during the intro to this film, they redo that section. It definitely does not look the same. There's definitely like glaring differences in it, but obviously the sentiment is still the same. One of the questions that I have, and I guess it becomes clearer in the TV series Lion Guard, is how Zira is related to Scar. And like how this whole interaction happens. Because theoretically, if Kovu is the same age as Kiara, like Scar is deceased before Kiara is born. And if Kiara is a similar age to Kovu, then Scar would be dead before Kovu was born and therefore would never actually have met him. So unless Kovu is, I don't know, how many ever years older than Kiara, for Scar to then have met them, there would be other cubs running around Pride Rock, I guess, before this division occurred. Unless, like, Zira and her lionesses were already a different sect and were already, like, banished from Mufasa for caring about Scar, and then Scar was running off to them to, like, you know, bolster Zira and stuff. But I don't know, the timeline and how people are, like, the connections between them, it seems off to me. I know they say that, like that Kovu isn't actually Scar's son, but Scar kind of, like, adopted him and wanted to raise him in his image. But again, I don't know how that is the case if Kiara and Kovu are of similar age, because Scar would have already been dead when Kovu was born. So I don't quite get that. So something that was really kind of funny to me was that, of course, after Kiara meets Kovu and there's their big standoff, which, by the way, nothing brings two kids together like danger. Regardless of whether they're kids or not. I learned about this in my, like, psychology of motivation class in university, where people are more likely to feel romantic attraction to each other if they've gone through some sort of adrenaline-inducing situation. I remember the teacher saying, like, oh, if you want somebody to like you, your first date should be, like, at a roller coaster or something like that, because that sort of adrenaline will bring you closer together. So naturally, nearly avoiding death has got to send all of those adrenaline juices pumping to bring Kovu and Kiara together. But anyway, after that whole situation happens and Mufasa takes Kiara away, Zira takes Kovu away, and did I say Mufasa? Simba takes Kiara away, and, you know, obviously he's pissed. And he does this, like, basically the same speech that Mufasa gave Simba after rescuing him from the elephant graveyard, but it's like the light version. So they basically try to say the same thing without actually giving the same speech. But Matthew Broderick, Simba delivering it, doesn't have the same weight and almost like air of importance that Mufasa James Earl Jones has when he delivers that speech to Simba. So I just thought, I chuckled at it, because I'm like, I know what you're trying to do, Simba, but, like, it's not sinking in the same way your dad told it. So Zira is totally an emotionally manipulative mom. She gives all of her love to Kovu. I guess he has, like, an older brother named Nuka, I think is his name. And she just completely ignores him, even though he is starved for her love and acceptance. I feel like there are families out there where this dynamic also occurs. I feel like I've heard stories about families like this, which isn't good. But yes, Zira was being classic type A, emotionally manipulative mom. So once Kovu and Kiara turn of age and this whole plan is set in motion, the circumstances of how they symbolize that Kiara is of age is she goes on a hunt by herself, I guess? Is it like some sort of coronation hunt? Where it's like, now you are of age, you must bring home a kill for the first time by yourself, I guess. I think that's the context. I don't know if that's a thing. I know that lionesses are the ones that are usually in charge of securing the kills, the food for the family. So I guess maybe all the other lionesses were just doing it up until this point, and now that Kiara is old enough, she gets to do it by herself? I don't know. It was interesting that this film actually showed a dying lion. So later on, obviously all the things are put in motion. Kovu and Kiara fall in love. Zira's all pissed. Basically, Kovu and Simba have this man-to-man talk or whatever. And then Zira uses that opportunity to ambush Simba to try to kill him. And it doesn't work, but obviously it puts super distrust in Simba. But I was very surprised to see that they actually showed, spoiler alert, the death of Nuka. So Nuka wants to impress his mom and basically finally get recognition from her and love from her. So he tries to kill Simba and ends up getting like trampled on by all of these logs. And they actually like show his dying breaths, which I thought was a lot darker than the first movie because they don't actually explicitly show any dying. I guess they kind of do with Mufasa, but not really. Like the death, he's already dead when Simba finds him. So I was kind of surprised to see that. And of course, after this happens, Simba's like, "Excuse me, Kovu, you just tried to get me killed." And he banishes Kovu from Pride Rock. But the thing that I didn't understand is why all the other animals are getting involved in pride politics, because there's this whole song where all of the other animals are like, "He's not one of us, he's a betrayer." And I'm like, you're not one of the lions either. I don't know why you're getting involved. I guess, I don't know if it's like because the animals and the lions are all part of this great circle of life, yada yada, that they're like, you don't get to be part of our circle or something. But it just seemed really out of place that all of a sudden, essentially all of the animal prey, I know like lions don't like eat rhinos and stuff, but essentially all the other animals are like, we're gonna get involved in this lion beef and sing about how Kovu isn't one of us. Like they're just in the know of all of the pride politics, which didn't really make sense to me. But what I loved is that this whole situation happens, and then of course Kiara gets her pivotal Disney princess moment where her dad forbids her from being with the love of her life, and she gets sent to her room and she does that thing where she cries in her bed, or just, where that, the like overly dramatic meme where they show all the princesses like flinging themselves on nearby objects and bawling their eyes out. Kiara got to have that moment too. So I thought that was very awesome because I was like, yep, you are definitely a Disney princess because you've had this moment where your overbearing dad banishes your boyfriend and you have a big ol' sob about it, which I loved. So of course, there's a big head where after the death of Nuka, Zira's like super pissed because she's like, can't trust Kovu, Nuka's dead, come on ladies, let's fight for Pride Rock. And while they're crossing the savannah, they walk through like a muddy area. And so all of them are covered in mud, but it almost looks like it's strategically done to make them look like they have war paint on, which I thought was really clever. It's almost like they all strategically walked into this mud puddle because they're like, we need to gear up for battle, which was funny. But of course, everything has a happy ending, and that's great. So now moving on to the credits. I felt bad actually because there's obviously the voice actors who played the young versions of Kiara and Kovu and the siblings and things, and then the older versions. But they only give the name credits to the older versions. They just put all of the young actors and actresses in an additional voices clump. So one of the additional voices, the voice of young Vitani, is Lacey Chabert, who's most, I guess, iconic for playing Gretchen Wieners in Mean Girls. But if you go back into her filmography, like, she's been acting for such a long time, and she's actually been very iconic with voice acting. Most notably, she plays, I think her name is Eliza Thornberry in The Wild Thornberrys. But she's actually voice acted in quite a lot of films. And she's another one, not to the same degree as Frank Welker, but if you look at her filmography, like, she's been probably in a lot of things that you enjoy, that you might not have realized that she was a part of. But I felt bad that they were all clumped in an additional voices section, even though they had distinct named roles. But I guess the credits team just couldn't be bothered. So similarly to the sequels for Aladdin, this film also states that this film would not have been possible without the inspiration from the original motion picture and the works of its talented artists. Again, I do appreciate when they credit and thank the original team for the film that they draw inspiration for this one. So again, on to the IMDb facts. Most of the original cast reprised their roles from the original, with most notable exceptions of Rowan Atkinson, who was replaced by Edward Hibbert as the voice of Zazu. Jeremy Irons was also replaced by Jim Cummings as the voice of Scar in this film, as he originally did for the last few lyrics of the song Be Prepared, allegedly. Scar's not really in this for very long. I'm not even sure where he shows up in, like, speaking form. But anyway, he was replaced by Jim Cummings as well. So again, the film takes Swahili translations for the names of some of their characters. So Zira means hate in Swahili, Kovu is Swahili for scar, and Nuka is Swahili for bad smell. Apparently, Josh Wheaton, most synonymous with Buffy, actually wrote the song My Lullaby, which is the villain song that Zira sings, and he received an Annie nomination for it. Cam Clark, who voiced Simba in his TV and video game appearances, provides Simba's singing voice for the film. I think this is for adult Simba, so Matthew Broderick is around as the voice of Simba, but the singing voice is Cam Clark, which is interesting because I know that Matthew Broderick has appeared on Broadway and things, and he does sing, so it's interesting that there's another voice for that. Anyway, Zira's role, like I had mentioned, I don't quite understand how Zira is related to Scar, but it says in this IMDb fact that Zira's role as a follower to Scar contradicts the events of the first film, where all the lionesses present at the time were followers of Mufasa and Simba and had fought beside Simba against Scar. It was later revealed in The Lion Guard that she and Scar were very close and that he shared his knowledge of the roar of the elders with her. So I've never watched The Lion Guard, so I don't know what that means. But I guess they do give more context in The Lion Guard about the relationship between Scar and Zira. But again, timeline-wise, it still doesn't kind of match up. So when Zira blames Kovu for the death of Nuka, her reasoning is ironic for somebody who had a high opinion of Scar. So she told Kovu that he betrayed his pride, which is exactly what Scar did, when he allowed the hyenas to take over. She also told him that he killed his own brother, which again is exactly what Scar did. Also, Kovu can't be held accountable for this because when Nuka fell, it had nothing to do with him. This scene is similar to when Scar accused Simba of murdering his father. But while Scar was simply trying to discourage Simba, it looks like Zira truly believed that Kovu killed Nuka. I love the irony of this. Scar is number one, I love him so much, but I'm gonna be mad at you for literally doing everything that Scar, my savior, has done. So one of the more interesting facts that I found was actually in the Goofs section of IMDb. So okapis appear several times in the film. Whilst these animals are native to Africa, they live in dense rainforests, not on the plains where the lions are found and where they appear in the film. They would never naturally encounter lions. So I wonder if, in an attempt to put fun, interesting animals and make the Pride Lands more kind of colorful, the savannah more colorful in terms of the animals that are getting together for the arrival of Kiara and for that weird Banishing Kovu song. The animators got all different types of animals for those scenes, but the okapis naturally would never encounter lions despite actually being from Africa as well. They're just in a different environment. So I thought that was very interesting. Now again, we're going to take one last break and we're going to dive into Lion King 1.5. And we're back. The final film that we will be discussing today is The Lion King 1.5 from 2004. So this film is basically a retelling of the original Lion King, but from the perspective of Timon and Pumbaa. The larger narrative focuses on Timon leaving his home where he feels like an outcast in search of his ideal place to live. Along the way, he meets Pumbaa and eventually Simba. Over time, Timon learns that it's not just the locale that creates the perfect home, but the people in it as well. So this film is essentially like a Timon origin story. I guess in the original Lion King, when Timon and Pumbaa are singing Hakuna Matata to Simba, and Pumbaa tells his story about how he was ostracized within his family, about, how he farts and stuff, which apparently he is the first, I don't know if he's the only, but he's the first Disney character to fart, to openly have flatulence, which they end up referring and relying on his flatulence a lot in the films. But yeah, random fact, he is the first character within the Disney universe to openly fart. But anyway, so I guess within that song they were originally going to do like a Timon origin story as well, but they abandoned that just to, I guess, tighten up the song. So they utilized what would have been that segment of the film and they expanded on that for this movie. So this is like a literal retelling of The Lion King. So they even literally reinterpret lines from the film. At one point, his mom is explaining something to him and she says, "Everything the light touches belongs to someone else," which is a direct reinterpretation of Mufasa's line to Simba about how everything the light touches belongs to them. One of the things that I was quite proud of myself for is that I found a hidden Mickey in the Meerkat tunnels. And I know that Disney films are iconic for adding hidden Mickeys into films, but I never actually find them first off. I usually end up, you find websites or articles that point out the hidden Mickeys for you. But I actually found one all on my own, so I was quite proud of myself. Apparently, jumping ahead a bit to an IMDb fact, there are actually 20 hidden in the film in total, but I found one on my own, so that was very exciting. Something else that I was quite proud of myself for finding out is that I noticed that the voice of Timon's mom sounded familiar and sounded like Marge Simpson, and I was correct. So Timon's mom is voiced by Julie Kavner, who is the iconic animated mom voice for Marge Simpson. So again, quite proud of myself for pointing that out. One of the questions that I have is when Timon is telling his side of the story about how, like his origin story about where he grew up, they pan out so far away from Pride Rock to the meerkat burrows, but the hyenas, Shenzi, Benzai, and Ed, show up at one point at the meerkat burrows. So what I want to know is how far away these meerkat burrows are from Pride Rock and the elephant graveyard, even though, I guess because Timon is small, so maybe the distance seems that much more vast and large to him. Or maybe hyenas do traverse large distances looking for food. But I wondered sort of geographically where the meerkat burrows were in relation to this, because the hyenas were just able to show up at the meerkat burrows while their home is in the Pride Rock Elephant Graveyard area. So that was my question. Speaking of different locales and things, basically, Timon and Pumbaa are looking for their forever home, right? And so they essentially travel, the way that they kind of show how they were in the movie sort of the whole time before Simba shows up and they essentially become his step-parents, is they are traveling through all the different settings in the first film looking for their forever home. So they pass by a section, like they pass by Pride Rock, they pass by a section that has the "I Just Can't Wait to Be King" segment. They pass by the weird geysery lair that Scar sings "Be Prepared" in, and stuff like that. So that's how they sort of track how we were there the whole time film situation. It was actually really sweet, though, to see once Simba does show up in Timon and Pumbaa's life, how they parent him. That was quite cute and sweet. So at one point, there's sort of this quip that the student has become the master, and Simba has fully embraced the Hakuna Matata lifestyle and has usurped Timon specifically as sort of the best and the chillest. So to try to prove his status as the Hakuna Matata master, they have a slug off where they basically try to eat as many slugs as possible. Or I guess they're snails because they're in shells. And it's definitely a spoof of a Western film because they have this specific music in it, which I later found out is the music from the film The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And then in doing more research, they actually spoof a bunch of films and shows in this film specifically. So some other references that they made were from the films In the Heat of the Night, Midnight Cowboy, Fiddler on the Roof, Apocalypse Now, Blues Brothers, Peter Gunn, and Mystery Science Theater 3000, which is a TV show. And I'll go into the IMDb fact about the Mystery Science Theater later. One of the things that sort of put me off a little bit was that all of the song repeats. So obviously while Timon and Pumbaa are going through their life, they're basically showing the movie from their perspective. All of the songs from the original movie also make appearances. When you're listening to the songs, they almost seem like light versions of the originals. But when I was looking up to see if they were sung by different people, the only one that had a different song voice credit to the originals was I Just Can't Wait to Be King. All of the other ones were the originals. But yeah, they reminded me of Hobbycraft versions of songs. So if you don't know, Hobbycraft is like the main craft store in the UK. I don't know if it's in all of the UK, but where I live, Hobbycraft is main craft store that I go to. And I love it because it's a craft store and I love crafts and it gives me everything I need. But the one thing that really frustrates me about this store is that they play weird adult contemporary covers of popular songs. So you're listening and you hear a song come on, you're like, oh yeah, I love this song, this is great. And then it starts and you're like, wait a second, this isn't how I remember the song. And it's this like really weird, tinny, adult contemporary version of your favorite song, and it just makes me mad. So watching this film, the song repeats in it very much reminded me of Hobbycraft versions of songs, the sort of like light adult contemporary version. But apparently the only one that I could really truly claim that for is I Just Can't Wait to Be King. But all of the other ones still seem a little off to me as well. If you watch this film, let me know if you feel that as well or if it's just me. In the end of the film, the credit scene, I forgot about this song actually because I hadn't seen this film. But one of the things that the Disney Channel or the Family Channel would do, because there's no commercials on it, to fill in the gaps between episodes, they would play some of these music videos from the Disney Channel. So some of the Disney Channel or Disney radio songs, obviously they would make music videos out of them, and a lot of the Disney actresses sort of needed to be triple threat, so they were singing, dancing, acting. So the songs that these Disney kids would create, the music videos would then be played in between the shows. So Raven does this song called Grazing in the Grass, but I couldn't remember the name of it because all I could remember was that it's basically called the Dig It song, because there's this whole like section where it goes, I can dig it, you can dig it, we can dig it, they can dig it, dig it, dig it, dig it, dig it, which I thought was really silly. But then again, this franchise wants me to go down these musical rabbit holes. I found out that it's actually a cover of a song. Originally, it was an instrumental created by Philemon Howe, which was recorded by Hugh Maskela in 1968. But then in 1969, a vocal version by Friends of Distinction was recorded, and that's a very popular version of the song. There's been plenty of covers since then. So it's actually I don't know if it's like a jazz instrumental, but it definitely was turned into like a soul funk song by Friends of Distinction. And then it got popified for Raven's cover of it. And if you really want some cringe early 2000s nostalgia stuff, I recommend watching the music video for it. I watched a few clips of it just so I could reminisce in the vibe. And it's like a big ol' helping of cheese. So if you would like that for your eye holes and your ear holes, I recommend that. But yes, so the Dig It song was played in the credits for this one. And I guess I'm speculating that the choice for this song specifically is because the story of this film revolves around meerkats, and one of the kind of bits in the song is that all meerkats do is dig to hide from hyenas to then dig more. And there's this really cute song that they brought Lee Boehm back to do another, like, to create more songs for this film. And he's one of the ones who works with Hans Zimmer to do, like, The Circle of Life and things like that. Anyway, so there's this dig song, and it's like, dig a tunnel, dig a tunnel. It's very cute. So I'm speculating that the reason why they decided to do this Grazing in the Grass song for this film is because half of the song lyrics are about digging. And I think obviously within the context of the 60s, like, they mean dig it as in, like, can you feel this? Like, do you think this is cool? Are you on my wavelength? But then they're also like, but hey, also it means literally digging, and meerkats literally dig. So that's how we decided to choose this song. That's my thought. Again, this film also states that it would not have been possible without the inspiration from the original motion picture and the work of its talented artists and animators, which again, I appreciate. Moving on to our IMDb facts. Again, like I had stated, there are 20 total hidden Mickeys in the film. I found one. Maybe you can find more. Like I had said about the references and the spoofs that are done, it is framed like a Mystery Science Theater episode. So the whole film basically has silhouettes of Timon and Pumbaa talking to each other throughout the movie. So it cuts to, like, them pausing the film, jumping in and out of the film itself. And I guess that's how Mystery Science Theater episodes are framed. So yeah, that is the justification for the reference. And I didn't realize that that was a reference. I just thought it was this cute little thing that they did. But there's an origin for that. Additionally, at the end of the movie, they have all of these other Disney animated characters that show up to watch the film again. Because basically they watch the film, and then Timon and Pumbaa are like, okay, cool, we're done now. And then Timon's mom shows up and is like, you didn't tell me you were watching the movie. Like, I want to watch too. And then all the other Disney animated characters show up, and then Timon's like, okay, cool, guess we're watching it from the beginning. And I don't know if I want to tell you how all the characters that are in this, because I'm on, again, shameless plug, at nostalgia_tash. I have a post where we're going to play a game to see if you can guess the character silhouettes. So there are 30 plus characters that show up. So maybe I'll leave that, and if you want, you can try to guess who those characters are. I do reveal them at some point, but I just won't in this podcast episode. So just one more thing before we wrap this up. I wanted to, because again, when you fall down this rabbit hole of trying to connect the films and their timelines and stuff, similar to Aladdin, this franchise spawned a TV show between 1995 and 1998. So it was the Timon and Pumbaa show, or Lion King's Timon and Pumbaa, I think is the specific name of the show. And from the looks of it, the show takes place after the original film, but it looks like before the second film, because obviously it ends the same year that the second film comes out. So from what I vaguely remember of the show, it's basically just like Timon and Pumbaa going on these zany adventures all over the place. And so I wonder if it's almost like at the end of the first film, Simba and Nala have Kiara, and at the beginning of the second film, it shows this again, but then like it's Kiara, it cuts to Kiara like as a young cub. So I guess Timon and Pumbaa must have took like a nanny gap year where they just like went traveling all over the place maybe. That's sort of where I think the timeline might be. Obviously I haven't watched the series in years, so I don't know if towards the end of the show or if like the other characters, maybe I think Simba makes an appearance, but besides Simba, if any other characters within the Lion King universe make an appearance, and then if that would put more clarity within the timeline of the TV show. But anyway, it's not like in Aladdin where the second film, Return of Jafar, was like a precursor to the TV show. I think the TV show is kind of wholly separate from these three films in the sense that like one doesn't lead into the other. So in conclusion, obviously you watch the first film. That's like iconic Disney classic. It has some of the best songs in Disney animated history. The second and third ones, I guess, Yeah, I would watch them. There's nothing special about them. They're cute. I think you can probably get away with not watching Lion King 1.5 because again, it just retells the story of the first Lion King. But if you want, I guess, more of a background about Timon as a character, if you're like super into side characters in movies and want to have more information or backstory about Timon and Pumbaa, yeah, you could watch it. But if anything, 100% the first one. Yeah, sure, watch the second one and give or take the third one, but they're all enjoyable. All right. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode, getting back to some classic animation, and I will see you guys next week. Thank you so much. Bye!